How to master your pain, patience, purpose, and power. You are not broken. You are being forged. Every man who has ever held real power, real unmovable, unshakable power did not get there by avoiding pain. He got there by consuming it, by sitting inside the fire until the fire had nothing left to teach him. Schopenhauer did not write for the weak. He wrote for the man who was done pretending the world was fair. Done waiting for justice that was never coming. Done shrinking himself to make other people comfortable. He wrote for you. But here's what no one tells you about mastering pain, patience, purpose, and power. They are not four separate things. They are one cycle, a complete system. And when you understand how that system works, you stop being a man who reacts to life and start being a man who architects it. This is not motivation. I don't do motivation. This is cold truth delivered straight. No softening, no apology. If you're ready to become untouchable, drop "I am the architect" in the comments right now. Let me know you're in this with me, because what comes next will either wake something up inside you or confirm you were never ready to begin with. Pain. Pain is not your enemy. Pain is your first teacher. And like all great teachers, it does not care whether you are comfortable. It does not care whether you are ready. It shows up when it decides to show up. And it demands that you learn or that you break. Most men break not because they are weak by nature, but because they were never taught what pain is actually for. You were told pain means something is wrong. You were told pain is a signal to stop, to retreat, to seek comfort. And so, the moment life pressed down on you, the moment betrayal arrived, failure arrived, isolation arrived, you ran, you numbed it, you buried it beneath distractions, substances, noise, and the opinions of people who were just as lost as you. But Schopenhauer understood something that the comfortable will never accept. Pain is information. Pain is the world showing you exactly where your weakness lies. And a man who cannot face his weakness cannot build his strength. It is that simple, that ruthless, that true. Every scar you carry is a map. Every wound that did not kill you drew a line between who you were and who you are being called to become. The question is not whether you suffered. Everyone suffers. The question is whether you extracted the lesson or simply survived the feeling. The man who masters pain does not pretend it doesn't exist. He does not perform toughness. He sits with it, studies it, lets it burn away everything that was never real in him to begin with. Because on the other side of fully faced pain is not just relief. It is clarity. And clarity in this world is power. Patience. Patience is not waiting. Let me say that again, because most men completely misunderstand this concept and it costs them everything. Patience is not passive. Patience is not sitting quietly while life passes you by. Patience is not the absence of ambition or the acceptance of mediocrity. That is not patience. That is surrender dressed in calm clothing. And Schopenhauer had zero respect for surrender regardless of how peaceful it looked from the outside. Real patience is strategic stillness. It is the lion who does not chase every animal that crosses the field. He conserves. He calculates. He waits for the moment when movement guarantees results. And then he moves with everything he has. No hesitation, no second guessing, total commitment born from total preparation. The world will test your patience deliberately. Understand that. The delays, the setbacks, the people who seem to be rising faster than you, the doors that stay closed no matter how hard you knock. These are not accidents. They are filters. They exist to separate the men who are building something real from the men who only want results without the process that makes results permanent. Impatience is a weakness that announces itself loudly. The man who cannot wait reveals that he does not trust himself. He reveals that his confidence is performance, not foundation. And the world's most dangerous opponents, the ones who win again and again across decades, they read impatience like a weapon. They let you exhaust yourself. They let you overextend, and then they act when you have nothing left. Do not be that man. Schopenhauer wrote that the wise man does what strong men were forced to do eventually, but he does it first and he does it deliberately. That is patience applied as strategy. That is time used as ammunition. You are not behind. You are not too late. You are not being overlooked by the universe. You are being tested to see whether you can hold your position while the pressure mounts and the doubt screams and every shortcut whispers your name. Hold the line. Before we go further, drop I am the architect in the comments if patience is something you are actively building right now. Most men are living someone else's life, not because they were forced to, not because someone held a weapon to their head and dictated their choices, but because they never stopped long enough to ask the one question that changes everything, the one question that separates a man with direction from a man with just activity. What am I actually here to do? Not what your parents expected, not what your culture rewarded, not what looked impressive on the outside while feeling completely hollow on the inside. What are you at your core? Beneath the conditioning, beneath the fear, beneath the version of yourself you perform for others. What are you actually built to pursue? Purpose is not found. Let me dismantle that comfortable lie right now. Purpose is not some buried treasure waiting patiently beneath the surface of your life, ready to reveal itself the moment you meditate enough, or read the right book, or have the right conversation. That is a fantasy sold to men who want meaning without the discomfort of honest self-examination. Purpose is forged. It is built through action, through failure, through the slow and often brutal process of eliminating everything that is not you until what remains is undeniable. Schopenhauer did not theorize about power from a place of comfort. He was imprisoned in his own way by a world that rejected his depth. He was met with silence and indifference. He was stripped of the audience he deserved. And inside that isolation, forced to confront everything he had lost, he wrote the most ruthlessly honest philosophy on existence the world has ever seen. His purpose was not given to him. It was extracted from his suffering. That is the dark truth about purpose that no motivational content will ever tell you. Your deepest sense of direction will not come from your best moments. It will come from your worst ones. It will emerge from the periods when everything collapsed and you discovered in that silence, in that wreckage, what you could not walk away from even if you tried. That thing, that obsession, that unreasonable, uncomfortable, inconvenient pull towards something specific. That is the beginning of your purpose. But knowing it is only the beginning, because purpose without execution is just a feeling, and feelings without discipline are just noise. A man of purpose moves differently. He stops dispersing his energy across 100 directions, trying to please 100 people. He becomes selective, strategic, almost cold in how he prioritizes, because he understands that every yes to something unaligned is a no to the thing that actually matters. And time, real, irretrievable time, is the only currency that cannot be earned back once spent. This is what Schopenhauer meant when he spoke of the man who resists the crushing will of the world. Not through luck, not through privilege. A man so anchored in his direction that chaos cannot disorient him. You need to become that man. Drop I am the architect in the comments if you are done living by someone else's design. Power. Power is the most misunderstood word in the human vocabulary. Ask 100 men what power means and 90 of them will describe the same thing. Money, status, authority, the ability to make others obey, the visible markers of dominance that society taught them to chase before they were old enough to question whether any of it was real. They will describe power as something external, something acquired, something displayed. And that is precisely why most men never actually have it. Real power is not what you own. It is not your title, your following, your bank account, or the fear you generate in rooms full of people pretending to respect you. Those things can be taken. Those things can collapse overnight. History is filled with men who had every external marker of power and still died as slaves to circumstances they could not control, opinions they could not survive, and emotions they never learned to govern. Real power begins where most men never look. It begins inside. Schopenhauer understood that the man who cannot govern his own cannot govern anything else. Not a legacy, not a business, not a single relationship of lasting value. Self-mastery is not a spiritual concept dressed in philosophical language. It is the most practical, most strategic, most ruthlessly effective foundation any man can build his life upon. Because the man who controls his reactions controls his outcomes. The man who controls his outcomes controls his trajectory. And the man who controls his trajectory over years, over decades, through setbacks and seasons and storms, becomes the kind of force that the world cannot ignore and cannot easily destroy. But here is where dark psychology enters the conversation. Power is not just internal discipline. Power is also perception. And perception, whether you are comfortable with this or not, is something that can be engineered. The way you speak, the way you move, the way you respond or choose not to respond, the way you position yourself in relation to others, the information you reveal, and the information you deliberately withhold. All of it constructs a picture in the minds of the people around you. Weak men are transparent. They broadcast their insecurities, their desires, their desperation without realizing it. Every overreaction is a confession. Every need for validation is a vulnerability handed freely to anyone watching closely enough to use it. The powerful man is a closed book, not cold for the sake of performance, not mysterious because it looks impressive, but genuinely self-contained, genuinely unbothered, genuinely rooted in something so deep inside himself that the turbulence of other people's opinions and other people's chaos simply does not penetrate to where his decisions are made. This is what makes him dangerous. Not aggression, not dominance displays, not intimidation tactics borrowed from insecure men trying to look strong. What makes him dangerous is that he cannot be read. He cannot be manipulated through flattery because he does not need approval. He cannot be destabilized through criticism because he has already judged himself honestly and made his peace with the verdict. He cannot be rushed, cornered, or emotionally hijacked because his center holds. That is power, quiet, deep, unshakable, and entirely self-generated. And it is available to you not as a gift, not as luck, not as something that arrives when conditions are perfect. It is available to you through the daily unglamorous, relentless practice of choosing mastery over comfort, depth over performance, and long-term architecture over short-term relief. The four pillars are now in front of you. Pain, patience, purpose, power. Now we learn how to build with them. The cycle that builds untouchable men. Nothing in this framework stands alone. That is the piece most men miss entirely. They hear about pain and they try to manage it in isolation. They hear about patience and they practice it disconnected from any larger strategy. They chase purpose like it exists in a separate dimension from their daily decisions. They pursue power as though it is a destination rather than a living, breathing state of being that must be continuously cultivated or continuously lost. They treat these four elements like separate tools sitting in separate drawers. And that fragmented approach produces fragmented results. A man who is occasionally disciplined, occasionally purposeful, occasionally powerful. A man who has flashes of greatness, surrounded by long stretches of mediocrity that quietly consume his years without his full awareness. That is not mastery. That is accidental living dressed in occasional intention. The truth that Schopenhauer embedded in every page he ever wrote. The truth that cold psychology confirms and that history validates over and over again across every culture and every era is that these four elements are not separate. They are a cycle, a complete self-reinforcing system that once understood and deliberately engaged transforms not just what a man does, but what a man fundamentally is. Here is how the cycle actually works. Pain arrives first. It always does. Pain is the entry point, the uninvited teacher who shows up without warning and begins dismantling everything that was built on weak foundations. Most men try to exit this stage as quickly as possible. They medicate, distract, perform recovery before recovery has actually happened. And because they leave too soon, they carry the wound forward unexamined. The lesson stays locked inside the suffering instead of being extracted and converted into intelligence. The man who stays, who faces the pain with open eyes and asks what it is revealing rather than simply when it will end, moves into the second stage naturally. Patience becomes his weapon because once pain has been honestly confronted, a man develops something that cannot be purchased or imitated. He develops unshakable composure. He has already survived the thing that most men are still afraid of. He is no longer running from discomfort, which means he is no longer making desperate decisions, driven by the need to escape it. He can wait, he can hold. He can let situations develop while others panic and overextend and reveal themselves completely. That composure creates the space for the third element to crystallize. Purpose becomes clear, not as a sudden revelation, not as a dramatic moment of divine inspiration, but as a slow, undeniable emergence. The man who has been through real pain, who has held real patience, who has stopped running and started building, he begins to see himself with rare honesty. He knows what he can endure. He knows what he refuses to endure. He knows what pulls him forward, even when everything external says stop. And that knowledge earned, not given, becomes the compass that orients every decision going forward, which feeds directly into the fourth element power compounds. Every cycle of pain metabolized, patience held, and purpose clarified adds another layer to a man's foundation. And foundations, unlike performances, do not crack under pressure. They do not collapse when circumstances shift. They do not require favorable conditions to hold their weight. The man who has run this cycle once is stronger. The man who has run it 10 times is a different category of human being entirely. Not louder, not more aggressive, not more visible necessarily, but deeper, denser, more rooted than anything the surface world can shake. This is what untouchable actually means. It does not mean nothing can hurt you. It means nothing can stop you. It means you have built a relationship with adversity so practiced and so honest that when the next wave arrives, and it will arrive, it always arrives, you do not brace against it. You receive it. You process it. You extract from it. And you move forward heavier with wisdom and lighter with fear. That is the cycle. That is the system. That is what separates the architects from the spectators. Drop "I am the architect" in the comments right now. If this cycle is already in motion in your life, because in part 6 we talk about the enemies of this process, and some of them are living inside you. The enemies living inside you. You want to talk about enemies? Most men spend their entire lives looking in the wrong direction. They scan the room for threats. They monitor their competition. They track who is rising, who is plotting, who is speaking against them in rooms they are not in. They build elaborate mental maps of external opposition. Who to trust, who to avoid, who to neutralize before the neutralization travels in the opposite direction. And while they are busy watching the horizon for incoming danger, the real enemies are already inside the walls, already inside them, quietly, consistently, methodically dismantling everything they are trying to build. Not through dramatic betrayal, not through visible sabotage, but through the slow, invisible erosion of repeated small surrenders. that accumulate over time into a life that looks nothing like what the man originally intended. Schopenhauer was ruthless about this. He understood that the man who loses himself rarely loses to an external force first. He loses to the internal decay that made him conquerable in the first place. The rot starts from within. It always does. And if you are serious about mastering pain, patience, purpose, and power, you need to identify these internal enemies with the same cold precision you would apply to any external threat, and then eliminate them without sentiment, without negotiation, and without the misguided mercy of believing you can manage them indefinitely rather than destroying them completely. So let's name them. The first enemy is comfort addiction. This is the most widespread, most socially accepted, and most devastatingly effective destroyer of male potential that exists. Comfort addiction is not laziness. Lazy men know they are lazy. Comfort addiction is more sophisticated than that. It disguises itself as self-care, as balance, as the reasonable reward for moderate effort. It whispers that you have worked hard enough today, that you deserve the rest, that the version of yourself you are building can wait until tomorrow, because tomorrow you will be more ready, more rested, more prepared to do the difficult thing you are currently avoiding. Tomorrow never carries the weight you load onto it tonight. And the man who keeps deferring his transformation to a more convenient moment will look up one day and realize that his entire life was lived in preparation for a version of himself that never actually arrived. The second enemy is approval dependency. This one is deeply embedded and often completely invisible to the men who carry it, because it presents itself as social awareness, as emotional intelligence, as the reasonable desire to be understood and respected by others. But underneath the presentation is something far more corrosive. A man who needs approval cannot make sovereign decisions. Every choice becomes filtered through the anticipated reaction of an audience, real or imagined. He softens his positions to avoid conflict. He abandons his direction when others express doubt. He performs strength publicly while privately adjusting himself to fit the expectations of people whose opinions should have no architectural role in the construction of his life whatsoever. Schopenhauer was unambiguous on this point. The man who governs by the approval of others is not governing at all. He is being governed by the herd, and the herd does not build greatness. The third enemy is identity rigidity. This is the one that will surprise you. Most men believe that knowing who they are is a strength, and it can be. But when identity becomes a cage, when a man's sense of self becomes so fixed, so defended, so emotionally protected, that he cannot update it in response to new evidence, it stops being an anchor and starts being a prison. Growth requires the willingness to let old versions of yourself die, not with grief, but with gratitude and cold finality. The man you were at 20 should not be making decisions for the man you need to become at 35. The beliefs that protected you in one season of life may be the exact limitations destroying your potential in the next. The man who cannot shed an outdated identity when the evidence demands it is choosing comfort over evolution. And evolution does not wait for men who refuse to move. The fourth enemy is deluded focus. In a world engineered to fragment your attention, the man who can hold a single direction with sustained undivided intensity possesses a competitive advantage, so rare that it functions almost like a superpower. Deluded focus kills more potential than failure ever could, because failure can be learned from. But the slow dispersion of energy across too many directions, too many goals, too many relationships and obligations that are not aligned with your core purpose, that produces a man who is busy but not building, active but not advancing, present everywhere and powerful nowhere. Know your enemies, name them clearly, then wage war without mercy. The Schopenhauerian code of self-mastery. Schopenhauer was not a pessimist in the way he is often misrepresented. He was a diagnostician, a man who looked at the world with completely unclouded eyes, stripped away every comfortable illusion that polite society used to avoid confronting reality, and wrote down exactly what he saw with a precision that made comfortable men deeply uncomfortable and strategically honest men permanently powerful. His philosophy was not a manual for despair. It was a manual for clarity, and clarity applied to the architecture of your own life, your own decisions, your own patterns of thought and behavior. That is what self-mastery actually looks like when it is practiced at the highest level. So what is the Schopenhauerian code of self-mastery? What are the actual operating principles that separate the man who reads about power from the man who embodies it so completely that it stops being something he does and becomes something he simply is? There are 5 principles. Learn them, internalize them, apply them without apology. The first principle is see clearly, not comfortably. The Schopenhauerian mind does not interpret reality through the filter of what it wishes were true. It does not soften inconvenient facts with optimistic narratives. It does not grant people more integrity than their behavior has actually demonstrated simply because extending that grace feels generous. You must develop the discipline of seeing people, situations, and yourself exactly as the evidence presents them. Not as you hope they are, not as they claim to be, but as their consistent actions over time have repeatedly proven them to be. This is not cynicism. This is the foundation of every correct decision you will ever make. The second principle is control your responses. Own your outcomes. Every time you react emotionally to a provocation, you hand control of your trajectory to whoever or whatever provoked you. You become a puppet operated by external circumstances rather than an architect operating by internal design. The Schopenhauerian man is not emotionless. He feels everything, but he has built such disciplined distance between stimulus and response that his feelings inform his thinking without hijacking his behavior. That gap, that fraction of controlled space between what happens to you and what you choose to do about it is where your power lies. Expand it daily. Guard it fiercely. The third principle is invest in leverage, not just effort. Hard work is necessary but insufficient. The world is full of exhausted men who work tirelessly in directions that produce diminishing returns because they never stop to evaluate whether their effort was positioned correctly. Schopenhauer understood that strategy multiplies effort. A man working with the right information, in the right position at the right moment, with clearly understood objectives, will consistently outperform the man who simply works harder without strategic architecture behind his movement. Effort without leverage is just expensive motion. Build positions that compound. Make moves that open multiple doors, rather than ones that require you to start from zero each time. The fourth principle is silence as strategy. This deserves more respect than most men give it. In a world where everyone is broadcasting, performing, explaining, and justifying, the man who speaks selectively and deliberately creates an immediate and powerful asymmetry. People reveal themselves constantly through words. They expose their fears, their insecurities, their strategies, their weaknesses, all through the compulsive need to fill silence and to be understood. The man who listens more than he speaks collects intelligence while spending none. He is never misquoted because he rarely overcommits to positions publicly. He is never manipulated through his own words because he releases them sparingly and with precision. Let others perform. You observe. Let others explain. The fifth principle is play the long game exclusively. Short-term thinking is the poverty of the strategic mind. Every decision you make is either an investment in the man you are becoming or a withdrawal from him. Every shortcut that sacrifices long-term positioning for immediate relief is a transaction that costs far more than it delivers. Schopenhauer's deepest insight about existence was not about suffering. It was about time. The man who thinks in decades, while his opponents think in days, will inherit every battlefield his opponents exhausted themselves fighting over. Patience compounded by strategy, compounded by consistent execution across sufficient time, does not just produce success. It produces dominance. The quiet, permanent, deeply established kind that cannot be rushed into existence and cannot be easily dislodged once built. These 5 principles are not suggestions. They are not aspirational ideals to admire from a distance. They are the operating system of the untouchable man. Install them. Run them daily. Let them replace every outdated code that has been producing results you no longer accept. Drop "I am the architect" in the comments if you are ready to operate by a completely different set of rules. Silence, isolation, and the power of disappearing. You have handed them the blueprint to your destruction without realizing you were the architect of your own exposure. So disappear. Go silent on the people who drain you. Go dark on the environments that diminish you. Remove your presence from spaces where your energy is consumed but never reciprocated. Where your growth is observed but never genuinely celebrated. Where your ambition is tolerated publicly and quietly resented privately by people who lack the courage to pursue their own. This is not isolation born from weakness. This is quarantine born from intelligence. Schopenhauer was explicit about the company a man keeps. He understood that environment is not just background. Environment is active. It shapes thinking, compresses ambition, normalizes mediocrity, and slowly recalibrates what a man believes is possible for himself without him ever noticing the recalibration is happening. The men around you are either expanding your ceiling or lowering it. There is no neutral company. There is no harmless mediocrity. Every environment you inhabit is either feeding your architecture or quietly dismantling it. In the silence, something extraordinary happens. You hear yourself clearly for the first time in years. The noise of other people's opinions, expectations, and emotional demands stops flooding the space where your own instincts are trying to speak. Your clarity sharpens. Your priorities reorganize naturally without force. Your energy, no longer dispersed across relationships and environments that were never aligned with your direction, begins to concentrate. And concentrated energy applied with purpose and patience is the most potent force a man can bring to any endeavor he chooses to pursue. Isolation is not the enemy of greatness. Undisciplined connection is. The greatest thinkers, strategists, and builders in human history all had one practice in common. They protected their solitude ferociously. They understood that the deepest work, the work that actually changes the trajectory of a life, cannot be done in noise. It cannot be done in performance. It cannot be done while managing the emotional reactions of people who were never invested in the destination. Do the deep work in the silence. Emerge only when you are ready to be undeniable.